It's the very first deck that I ever covered in a video. That was back in July of 2019. And what I'm talking about is Denjin Renki for Ryu in TEPPEN. Now, back then, people were experimenting a lot with Shinko Hadouken and Denjin, trying to figure out which one was better for the bulk of those direct damage when played red units that you're all probably familiar with. Denjin eventually fell off. It was something that you never saw. But now, with the Haunted by Memories expansion, the deck type has a lot of new support, and I believe that it is a firm contender for a tier 1 deck. Before we get into that, you need to understand how Denjin Renki works. It's Ryu's second hero art, and it costs 22 AP to give a buffing effect to all the cards in your hand, EX pocket, and on your board. This is equivalent to damage dealing effects +2. Now what that means is, let's say as an example, you have a sneak attack in your hand. That's 2 AP to deal 2 damage to the enemy hero plus an AP charge effect along with it. That means that if the sneak attack were affected by the Denjin Renki buff, it's dealing 4 damage instead. I cannot and will not take full credit for this deck because I did not craft it on my own. I consulted with a lot of people, specifically in the Ryu channel of the TEPPEN community Discord. Reploid0 is a player in particular who posted a variation similar to this. I tried it out and had a lot of success with it. So I made one particular tweak, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. So hats off to him. He's a great guy for posting this deck. And if you want more Denjin tech, the Ryu channel in the Discord is where I'd recommend you go. Right off the bat, you'll notice that there's not a lot of units in this deck. In particular, the only ones that are here are Forest Spare, Ashley Graham, Cody, Lagiacrus, and Anita. This deck focuses primarily on playing a very passive defensive playstyle, which is you're just going to try to focus on keeping your opponent's board clear, allowing them no units to deal damage to you, but also setting up situations to where you can chip away at their health as you go. And you've got a lot of cards that allow you to do that. Sneak Attack and Headshot in particular are able to deal a lot of direct damage, particularly in response during active response. A new addition to that is Agent's Memories, one of the most powerful legendaries from this new set. I've talked about it a lot. This is a great way to finish off your opponent, especially if you've been sitting on this for at least 1 tick of Denjin Renki, allowing you to deal 9 damage to your opponent, which is a lot off of just 1-2 MP action. A couple of other cards I want to talk about, particularly Incendiary Device, which deals 1 damage to all enemy units, but then deals an additional 1 damage to all enemy units if you have Memory 4. This gets buffed twice in the case of Denjin. So if you use this after it's been affected by Denjin, it will deal 3 damage and then another 3 damage. That is a lot. The fact that the damage is split means that it could clear shields and then deal damage to the unit that you are targeting. You'll see more about how these particular cards are played in just a moment, but I've also done you one better, and I have made an Imgur album of a few more Ryu builds specifically for Denjin because there are a lot of ways that you can build this deck because of the amount of support they got from the new expansion. So if this build isn't quite fitting for you, I'd recommend you go check out a few more of those, which again, not from me, are from the fantastic people in the Ryu channel in the TEPPEN community Discord. So again, that link will be in the description. Mono Black is as popular as it's ever been, so don't be surprised when you run into several of these matchups as you begin to climb. Now, luckily for you, most Mono Black decks will play a little bit slower and kind of allow you to dictate the pace of the match. Not always, but a lot of times. And what you're going to see in this specific matchup here against Spike Launch and Urgagante is they do give me that chance to dictate the pace of the game. So starting hand wise, Agent's Memories isn't great to start with because you're not going to get usage out of it for a while. Now it's nice because you know you will at least get 1 guaranteed Denjin tick off of it, because more than likely you will never find a situation where you need to use it before you hit 22 AP. The rest of the hand is okay. Starting out with the sneak attacks is good because that allows us easy ways to build up our memory, helps us get a little bit closer to Denjin. Forest here also isn't bad. He's decent for those situations where you have an abundance of AP and both players are just kind of waiting for something to happen. Anita is also not bad in this situation either. Cody, not useful until we get to that memory threshold. You'll see Forest is going to go to the murderous spikes, but nothing we can do about that, and we're not super worried about it anyway. So our next play here is definitely going to be Anita. Now we're hoping that he will play something to give us some opportunities to use some actions here. And as you can see, I'm sitting here pondering about what to do and eventually decide to go with the Anita, and we draw into Headshot, which is absolutely fantastic. And he even lets us cast it almost for free because he activates Conspirator Speech, which will, you know, hurt us a little bit later down the road, but it's not a big deal. So the Headshot comes out, and then he attempts to cast Rebirth, which I think was a mistake because he didn't have anything to rebirth at this point. So now we're at the threshold where Cody can do work, and our Incendiary Device and our Calamity cards that deal AoE damage spread among multiple units, those have now come online, especially with this Trust Amid Suspicion coming out for this middle Nello Angelo. Now he is going to buff with Psycho Power to keep it alive. He's trying to sacrifice life so that he will have maximum usability with that Spike Launch when it finally does come online. Now we're just going to let it go. Anita's not going to die from that one trade right there, and she's kind of outlived her usefulness at this point. We're okay if she manages to go away. You'll also notice we've got a very generous life lead here. So we throw the Cody down to trade with the other Angelo, and then we buff into our first Denjin, which is great. We're getting close to that 7 memory threshold where Agent's Memories will deal 7 damage flat, but it'll be 9 because we have Denjin. And you'll notice we also have a buffed Headshot in our hand. We've got Incendiary Devices, Calamity. We've got a lot of tools to work with. So we're going to use the Headshot just to drop them down really, really low. Now in this situation, a mono black player is going to be looking to Selfish Predation this Tyrant more often than not. I mean, he needs to heal in some capacity. He has not managed to put down a Gormagala to be able to trigger its Ascended form, or its growth form, excuse me. That's not an Ascension unit. So we throw down Ashley because we have an abundance of MP. And then you'll see he tries to pull off Mad Massacre. And this is where Blockade comes in. So Blockade, what it does is it deals 3 damage at base to an enemy unit. And if it destroys that unit, it removes it from the game and doesn't trigger death effects. So if that would have worked, the Tyrant wouldn't have actually spawned the Super Tyrant. But it's not going to work. So we throw down Calamity because I would like to keep this Ashley alive for as long as I can. So the Ashley lives and the Super Tyrant comes out, but he is a weak boy. He is super, super weak, and we can deal with this very, very easily. He finally plays a Gormagala and goes for the desperate act to level it up to give himself some more health. Now we're going to be looking to throw down Incendiary Device, which, as you can see, because of the Denjin, is dealing 4 damage twice. That is an insane amount of damage. So both of his units are now gone, and we are in great shape. I'm not getting in any hurry. I could have played Agent's Memories here to wrap it up because he does not have a unit to Selfish Predation off of. So in this situation, I should have just gone ahead and played Agent's Memories, but I was playing a little too passively here. So keep in mind, I could have ended the game at this point. It could have been over with, could have been donezo, but I was playing a little too passively and too carefully. So now what's happening is I'm just throwing things out on the board. I'm going to get my next Denjin. Agent's Memories is now going to deal an insane amount of damage when it comes out. And here comes the Rebirth for one of his Magalas. He gets the Gormagala, which I'm assuming is going to be leveled up with the second Gormagala. It does. It puts him at 9 HP. So now he actually has something he can Selfish Predation off of. So now I have to be careful. But we have another Incendiary Device, which is dealing, you see those numbers? 14 damage. Wow. So as I expected, he does have the Selfish Predation here. So he triggers the Selfish Predation, and now I'm pondering if it's time to use Agent's Memories. I throw it out because he could have one more Selfish Predation. But what you will see here is that this Agent's Memories resolves, and although we do manage to win this match, we could have won it a lot earlier. Zero is by far the most popular hero in the game at the moment, so you're going to be running into him very, very often. So it's important to showcase what I can in terms of that matchup. And because Zero is so versatile and he works with a bunch of different decks, you never really know what you're up against. Even the hero art can be deceptive. So he's using Fight Against Inner Demons, which is the hero art that I showed you with a 4s build last week, but you'll see here this is not exactly 4s. So our hand is okay. This is actually using a variation when I was using Bit. instead of Ashley. So keep that in mind. I'm using Bit for this, which is another card that you'll see in a few Denjin decks here and there. Typically, most Ryu players agree that 2 is too many, and this match was kind of in an experimental phase when I was just trying to figure out what works for me. So we have Forest down, and we decided to throw Bit down because we have so much MP. There's no reason not to. And now we need to start getting towards our memory threshold. So I throw out Headshot, and we draw into the Sneak Attack, which will be another great way to get us even closer to that threshold. He ascends into a Rainy Turtloid, which is going to deal a little bit of damage, but now we're going to use this opportunity to get some extra damage from the Bit and get us closer to that memory count. Now he chooses to seal the Bit, but we're going to get that last little bit of damage. We're going to throw that second Sneak Attack out there, which will get us ever so closer to a Denjin trigger, and we're in pretty good shape here. Now this is an unusual deck, the Iris and the Rainy Turtloid. It's definitely unusual, but Zero's hero art, fighting against inner demons, is just really good across the board. And this match was in ranked. I promise you it was in ranked. So now we see he gets his first trigger of fighting against inner demons. We don't know what he pulls, but both of those options in particular are very good. So I wait for the shield to pop, and then we are going down with Calamity. We cast Calamity to deal a good chunk of damage to our opponent here. And then we will be able to trigger our Denjin after this. He's going to get rid of our Bit with his Maverick, which actually, no, I forgot that this happened, but the Maverick's actually not going to work because Bit is above 6 MP cost. So Bit stays. Pardon me, Bit stays. I'd forgotten about that. So the Denjin comes out, and now we've got all sorts of buffs in our hand. That Rainy Turtloid in the middle is a lot less scary, especially because he's on life support. He throws down the Raw Turtloid, which I'm not really afraid of, because we have all the damage in the world. Speaking of all the damage in the world, we throw down an Incendiary Device, which is going to deal 2 counts of 3 damage. Now, he is going to go ahead and negate this because he wants to keep those resources out, which is smart. I can't blame him. And using that extra 2 MP that we get, we are going to throw down a Headshot to get this Zero as close to life support as we can. Now, we don't have Agent's Memories in hand as a finisher, but we do have enough resources to get the job done. This Bit up top is going to trade with this Raw Turtloid unless he ascends, so there's really no reason for us to go above and beyond to try to get rid of it. But since we drew into it, we draw into Lightning Bolt. Important to note, this was again during my experimental phase. I have since taken out all the Lightning Bolts for Blockade. So I would really recommend swapping Blockade instead of Lightning Bolt. It's much more effective. This is just kind of when I was experimenting with a couple of the decks that I found on the Discord. Again, would really prefer Blockade over Lightning Bolt, but you run what's best for you. So the Zero's on life support. He throws down the layer. We are just waiting at this point to clinch victory. He gets one final activation here from his hero art, but we're in great shape. Cody comes down, pops that battery, really leaving him with nowhere to run. We have a Headshot, which is buffed on deck in case we need it, but the Bit that managed to stick around for what seems like a long time closes out that match for us. Let's go into another Zero match. This is another Rokoha game, but I think it is important to show you this match in particular because this shows how, even though you're playing passive and your opponent is allowing you to play a really defensive game, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will have the edge. This is a very long game, and this is very important to understand what the majority of Rokoha players are going to do. So I want you to watch this match in particular. We draw into an okay hand. We've got a lot of cheap actions that will allow us to hit our memory threshold for the majority of our deck. Things like Calamity, Incendiary Device, Cody. We've got enough actions in hand to get to that point. So he's just waiting to see what I will do. So I've got the AP, so we're going to throw down a Sneak Attack. Get extra 2 damage, get a little bit of AP charge on the way. And out comes the new Colleen, which explores for a weakness whenever she is played. We are not super scared of her. So if we take 3 from her at one point, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. So we throw down another Sneak Attack, and then we're just waiting to see what's going to happen. And now is the perfect point to use Blockade Strike. I think that is the name. It's got Blockade in the name. All you really need to know is how I explained it earlier, which is it deals 3 damage, nullifies death effects, removes the card from the game if it dies. He counters it, which I think is a mistake because this Colleen has kind of already done her job. She doesn't really seem that important in the grand scheme of things, but there's nothing we can really do about it, so we throw down a headshot, and now we've gotten plenty of actions out. We're going to be looking to deal some damage. He's using Foresight, and one thing I want you to notice is that this Zero player is using a lot of cheap actions that don't necessarily facilitate a big advantage in the moment. And that is because this Zero player and many others that you are going to run into on the ladder are going to be playing those cheap actions for one big climax, and that is going to be using the legendary action to spawn 3 of the Mavericks, which I guess I just kind of spoiled this match for you, but that is what he is building towards. And a lot of Zero players are going to be looking to cycle through almost every card in their deck because they have to hit 15 memory. That's 15 actions, that's a lot. So he's tossing Splendid Buffets to get rid of this Lagiacrus, heal up. He's now at 30, and he's got a Rakoha. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind, early game Rakoha is not scary for a Denjin player. And even in some situations, it's not scary in the end game, because a lot of times when you get to the end game, you will have dealt enough damage that it doesn't really matter if your units kick the bucket. Forrest in particular, it doesn't really matter if he dies, because he's going to be dealing his damage either way. And here comes Jackpot. This is another one of those cheap actions that don't necessarily translate to big advantage. It's just -1 attack. Not really that big of a deal, but it's getting him one step closer to that threshold. Plus it also combos with Deadly Traps. So not only is he bouncing my Forest, but the way this works is he's also removing the Denjin buff from Forest. You'll notice that the little electric effect on the cards that have been buffed by Denjin is no longer present on Forest as it sits in my EX pocket. That means the buff has been nullified. That's going to come into play at least one more time in this game. So Forest is not necessarily sitting on that buff, and the Zero here cycling through tons and tons of actions, getting himself some MP boost, filling up his EX pocket. He's got 1 Rakoha on deck. Again, the end game, the final goal for him is 15 AP, so he can drop that massive action and snowball off of it. We throw Forest down because while we could throw down an Ashley, you know, at the first stage, rather throw Forest down in case he's got something to deal with an immediate threat. I use air quotes when I say threat for Forest because he's not a huge deal. And now we're going to throw down Ashley. And out comes his 3rd Splendid Buffet, which will deal with this Forest and deal some damage. But he's going to heal up from it, so he has the life lead. And we're about 1.5 minutes into this one. Another Jackpot comes out. Again, not immediate Born Impact. In fact, it doesn't really matter all that much on Ashley because she's not swinging. She cannot attack. But again, he's getting closer and closer to that threshold. He's almost to the point where he's got 2 Rakohas. And so another cheap action. 1 MP for repairs gives 1 HP to Trish. Again, not a huge deal, but building towards that 15. That's where we're going at this point. And that's kind of the thing that we have to deal with. And another Deadly Traps to come out, which will bounce this Ashley, and it will remove that buff from Ashley. So while I was playing this, I didn't necessarily realize that I was falling behind. In my mind, when I was playing this, I thought that I was ahead because he was cycling through almost his entire deck. Take a look at his deck count, guys. He's only got 6 cards left in his deck, whereas I've got 15. It would seem that I have all of the resources in the world. But what you will see here before too long is that Denjin Ryu's resources don't deal so well with those Mavericks when you play that action that has 15 memory. You'll see it whenever it comes up here in just a few moments. But again, we are playing this slow, methodical game of chicken. He throws down the Legendary V, and the 3rd Jackpot comes out for a cheap Resonate, cheap building up to that memory count. And now's an okay time to throw down the Calamity, which will deal some bonus damage. The Repairs comes out, another cheap action on that V, which will, it seems like it will keep it around for a little bit, but not for very long because we've got enough in our hands to deal with it. We throw out another Denjin, which is going to be buffing every action in hand. Some of the actions and units in our hand have 2 stacks of the Denjin buff. We throw Cody down, he does some good cleanup. And then comes Demonic Intimidation to get rid of the Cody. Now, is that a huge deal? No, because that just means Cody's going to be doing damage again. But when he is bounced, he will not have the EX pocket. He won't have the buff when he goes to the EX pocket. So while we do get another chance to use the Cody, he is going to be weaker. And probably part of his strategy was just to keep my board as open as he can, so there's not a lot of opposition when those Mavericks do come down. You'll notice he has plenty of stacks of Rakoha on deck, saving them for the moment when he needs them, and that is to protect those Mavericks from any pain that I may dish out. So he throws out another Colleen, get himself another weakness, and he only has one card remaining in deck. And he finally decides to trigger a Rakoha to clear out my 2 units. It is at 12 damage. It's hit that 10 memory threshold. And now we are again playing the waiting game. Life points are tied. We are almost 3 minutes into this game. And it's a situation of who is going to blink first. I decided to throw down Ashley and throw down Headshot, which I think this was a mistake in me overcommitting, because then that gives him free MP to cast X Hunters. And out comes those 3 Mavericks. They are maximum buff. 2 of them have Veil. 1 of them is swinging for so much damage, and he already has another Rakoha trigger. And this is where things begin to unravel for me, because I just simply do not have enough damage to keep up with those units. And this is just going to allow him to snowball out of control. I hadn't experienced this a whole lot myself, but after talking to a few players, in particular after this game, I found out that apparently this is a common strategy, is for 0 players to just kind of stall things out until they get to that point, and then just kind of run away with the board with that 1 card. And you'll see that is the way that he managed to get the win. So that's Denjin. I hope I have given you enough resources to take the deck into your own hands, look at all the different support options, and really mold the deck based on your playstyle. Let me know what you think of this video. Let me know what you think of Denjin in general. I try my best to read all the comments that you guys leave for me. You guys are fantastic. And if this is this kind of content that you enjoy, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to subscribe, and you should probably tap the bell so you know when the next video comes out. Also, drop me suggestions for future TEPPEN topics you want me to see. A lot of you guys voted in my poll recently, and that's fantastic. I'm going to start working on all of those projects, but until the next video, I'll see you later.